And yeah, it was like you. I'm in hospital. I've had a bit of a tear in an artery. They're saying I'll be a bit slow for a few days, but I should be back at it pretty soon. Which I guess it's a blessing to be like that at that point in time. You don't want to know what's necessarily ahead and what challenges you're going to run into, and where that would be awful to sit in a hospital bed and be like, okay, you're going to come up against this, and this in the next 12 months. You'd have a meltdown. So that ignorance is bliss is probably a good place to be, and you just have to take it day by day.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Bill from recoveryafterstroke.com. This is episode 114, and my guest today is Amy Wells. At 35, Amy experienced an ischemic stroke caused by a vertebral artery dissection. Before the stroke, almost every waking hour of Amy's life was scheduled and jam-packed with things that needed to be done and events to participate in. In our chat, we talk about what it's like for her and the family almost a year post-stroke and how life has changed for the better. Now, before we get started, if stroke has made you feel isolated and lacking purpose, you're not alone. If you are fed up with the lack of progress during your stroke recovery, I want you to know that there is help available. Most stroke survivors have been where you are now, and you should know that it is possible to get to the other side with a little support. For years now, I've been helping stroke survivors beat fatigue, reduce anxiety, and get their confidence back from stroke. As someone who considers themselves fully healed after 3 brain hemorrhages and brain surgery, I will spend time with you, help you get clarity on what the first thing is that you need to do to help you get past the roadblocks that are stopping you from getting back to your life before stroke. When you sign up to one of the Recovery After Stroke support packages, you will get help from someone who was where you are now and has turned the corner to being healthy again. There are different levels of support with packages offering private one-on-one coaching with myself, instant access to online training materials, access to courses, monthly trainings and challenges made by a stroke survivor for stroke survivors. All trainings are transcribed to PDF for people that prefer to read and take notes or highlight important bits for reviewing at a later time. You can access the training area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and complete training at your own pace without needing to leave the comfort of your own home. People that have already taken action and done what you are still thinking of doing have described recovery after stroke coaching as leaving them feeling much more positive about themselves and as having a clearer understanding of what they can do to take responsibility for their own recovery. If you have tried another program and are still feeling the same or not much better off than where you were when you started, then you might want to consider a more tailored approach where support is designed specifically for you. All support packages are free for the first 7 days so you can see if you have chosen the right solution for you. To find out more, simply go to recoveryafterstroke.com or send an email to bill@recoveryafterstroke.com. I answer all my emails personally. And now it's on with the show. Amy Wells, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
It's a pleasure having you here. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Okay, October 2019, life was bubbling along as normal. Normal probably is a bit questionable now. I was, trying to do it all, thought I was invincible. I had a job which was quite stressful, quite demanding. I have 2 young children who I like to overcommit to extracurricular activities. I like to then take on their extracurricular activities. I'm not good at saying no, like to jam pack the days and the weekends. I also exercised full on pretty much every morning, every second morning of the week at 6 a.m. before everybody woke up. And I socialized a lot. So that's how I thought life was. That's how I thought life was supposed to be until I had the shock of my life. I had a great day at the races on a Saturday last October and went to work that following Monday and just felt a bit off during the day. I thought maybe one of the kids might have passed on a virus and I was coming down with a bit of a cold or something. So as the day went on, I just sort of, had a bit of a sore neck and, couldn't really look over my left shoulder. I was like, what is this? I must have gone too hard in my workout last night. Anyway, it was about 3:00 in the afternoon and I'd walked out of the office with one of my colleagues. And as we were walking back in with cups of tea, I looked at my feet and they sort of went blurry. And then I looked up and the room did a spin. And I felt, oh, that was a bit strange. So I kept on walking, and as I sat down at the office desk, I felt my left ear being pulled towards the ground, almost like a force, something I'd never experienced before in my life.
Like physically, felt like it was being physically pulled.
Like someone was pulling a string sort of out of my ear towards the ground, my whole left side. And I tried to sit up and I was able to sort of fight it. And I said to the guy in the office with me, I don't feel so good. And, I just thought I'm getting a little bit sick, but I don't know about this spinning and this force. And I said, I'll just lay down on the floor and put my feet up on a chair. This guy must have thought I was a bit crazy, but anyway, that didn't seem to fix the problem either. And then half an hour later or so, I said, I might just go home. So my colleague drove me home in my car, and I got home and basically went to bed, took some Nurofen, went to bed. My husband fed the kids, and I think I must have fallen asleep because about 9:00 p.m. I woke up and tried to lift my head off the pillow, and it was that same force that didn't want to come off the pillow. And then I sort of opened my eyes and I felt like I was on a roller coaster. So if you imagine doing like a loop on at a theme park, I was like, oh yeah, this dizziness is back. And when I did get home from work, I was, self-diagnosing on Google. Okay, dizziness, head spinning. What does this mean? And obviously, that's not a good idea at the best of times. So yeah, I sort of called out to my husband, and luckily the kids were in bed, and I said, yeah, I'm not good. I think it's hospital time. I think something's wrong here. And he said, okay, get out of bed and call your mum and get in the car. I was like, no, I don't think I can walk. And then I started becoming nauseous, and luckily my mum lives just around the block, so she'd started walking over, and my husband had got me a bucket and I sort of started throwing up. And I said, yeah, I think it's ambulance. I think, I could hardly speak, and but we knew that it was starting to look a bit more serious than just a virus or food poisoning from the races on the weekend. And so then the ambulance took me into the A&E. I spent the night, in a very bright emergency department, laying on a bed, throwing up anything I had to throw up, and my husband sitting on this chair. And I remember if I had my eyes open, it looked like he was coming off the wall. So he looked like he was turned 90 degrees. But if I had my eyes closed, it was like bright yellow strobing, like hallucinations, memories I couldn't recall, couldn't tell you about now because I didn't even know I had them in my mind. So it's obviously that subconscious. So really bizarre experience, which sort of didn't let up till about 8:00 the next morning. Funnily enough, though, I could hear everything everyone was saying. So I was very much with it, and even though my mind wasn't, I could hear exactly what the doctors were saying. I could hear the cleaners talking. I could hear what was going on in that emergency department. And when they were talking about me, I heard certain words thrown around like meningitis or, she's got vertigo. Should be going home at 9:00 in the morning, and me thinking to myself, there's no way I can go home feeling like this. So the next morning the physician came up and said, we're going to do 2 scans, a CT and an MRI. So they got me to complete those, and they were interesting because every time I moved my neck even slightly, I threw up. So yeah, just looking back on that, what an awful experience. And I was so embarrassed. I can't move my neck without throwing up. And these poor nurses had to get me in position. But yeah, once the MRI and the CT were done, they were able to conclude that I'd had a vertebral artery dissection on the right side of my neck. And following that, after a few days in hospital, we did what did we do? We did a angiogram of my renal arteries and also of my brain, and they sort of thought I had a condition called FMD, which I think the inside of your arteries looks like a string of pearls, so it can look a little bit rougher than it's supposed to. I guess that's how I interpret it, and that condition perhaps was responsible for the small tear that formed, and then the blood clot that sort of moved around to the tear and then broke off. So the stroke itself was in the cerebellum. So as the blood clotted around the tear, it broke off, travelled up and landed on my cerebellum. So essentially that's what happened.
Intense.
Yeah, 9 days, I think, in hospital. I didn't actually hear the word stroke for, I think, about 3 days. These doctors talk in their language they talk in, and I remember the neurologist came in on a particular morning. My mum was in the room, and he came in and he was bouncing around and he was saying, "Oh, yeah, so yeah, these strokes are, not so bad. You'll be back to work. You'll be back doing what you were doing before." Like, seemed very, very positive. And I just said to him, "Hang on, did you just say stroke?" And he's like, "Yeah, small stroke on your cerebellum." And I was sort of like, wind it back a bit. Hang on. I thought we're talking about a dissection. What's a dissection? So to get it really spelled out at that basic level, I guess didn't really happen until I sort of got wind of what was going on. And yeah, bit of a challenge, because then when you hear the word stroke, that's sort of alarm bells. And
I'm too young to have a stroke.
Well, yeah, I just thought I had to be at work that day. I was like, stroke? How did this happen?
That condition you mentioned, FMD,
Yes.
Fibromuscular Dysplasia.
Yes.
Yeah, and when you look at the images, they look like, it does look like the blood vessels look like a string of pearls that have been put together, and what it seems to do is therefore create the incorrect blood flow, and because of the different places the blood's got to go to flow, instead of flowing straight across, bits get stuck on the inside of the blood vessel, and then slowly they just collect and they gather bits of blood, and then when they get big enough they just let go and then they just move. So that seems to be what it looks like that might have happened. And it's similar to what happens to people who have a hole in the heart, and then the heart pumps the blood as per normal, but because of that little hole, the blood flow changes and the direction of it changes, and then it gets stuck in a little bit of spot, and then it just increases in size, and then it lets go. And the first time they realized they had a hole in the heart was when they end up in hospital, and they've been told the same thing that you were told.
Sure.
But yeah, doctors, they're so good at what they do. In order to be good at that, I think they've got to be bad at communication or something, because most of them can't communicate if their life depended on it.
Yes, or they're just on a bit of a different level, aren't they? And if it's not a crisis, which they obviously thought, the crisis was over, you're okay now. It sort of gets downplayed.
How did it? So you're in hospital, and then you're thinking you're going to go to work, because that was my whole routine. That was why I didn't go to hospital for 7 days, because I had all these jobs to do. That's why I argued with my chiropractor, who told me to go to the hospital with my wife, with everybody. So then the next day I rang one of my clients and I said to him, "Listen, I'm in hospital, and they reckon that I've had a bleed in the brain or something, and I can't come to work today. I know we've got to do this job." And I started bawling my eyes out to my client, thinking the world's going to come to an end. And fair enough, right? Did you end up going to work? Like, what happened that next phase? How did you get your head around, I'm actually not going to be going to work today?
Yeah, I think I was a bit delirious, to be honest. The first thing I said to the neurologist was, "When will I be back at work?" Work was my identity. I'm a finance manager of a large hospital, and um, that's all I know is finance, accounting, and deadlines, and you know, you work to a monthly cycle, so everything's so structured. And you've got deadlines throughout the month, and people that need certain reports and forecasts each week. And my stroke happened on a Monday night, so on Tuesday afternoons we had a weekly video call with all the different hospitals in the state. And I was thinking, oh well, probably not going to be able to do that from the hospital bed at 3 o'clock today. So I had my mum call my boss and explain that, there was no word of stroke at that point. It was Amy's in hospital with the symptoms, etc. And funnily, because my bosses are all ex-nurses or ex-medical professionals, they have known ahead of time, I guess, what is ahead of me. And, I'm still a little bit delirious to it, and a little bit like, no, I'm invincible. This isn't that big a deal. Things will go back to normal. And I guess resistance to accept. I'm much better at it now. But yeah, straight away, I look at text messages that I sent people during that hospital stay. I was doing a clean out last week, and I found some text messages from October. And yeah, it was like you. I'm in hospital. I've had a bit of a tear in an artery. They're saying I'll be a bit slow for a few days, but I should be back at it pretty soon. Which I guess it's a blessing to be like that at that point in time. You don't want to know what's necessarily ahead and what challenges you're going to run into, and where that would be awful to sit in a hospital bed and be like, okay, you're going to come up against this, and this in the next 12 months. You'd have a meltdown. So that ignorance is bliss is probably a good place to be, and you just have to take it day by day.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
I agree with you. I was probably oblivious to everything that happened for around 6 weeks, and then it happened again to me because the issue wasn't rectified immediately, and it couldn't be rectified for, it turned out, up to almost 3 years, right? But my identity was work, running my business. My identity was telling myself that I needed to be doing that 7 days a week, 12 hours to 16 hours a day, from waking up in the morning, being at the job, to coming home and doing the quotes, and then doing the paperwork, and then doing the emails, and then doing all that junk. That my identity was, I was going to be that guy. That's the only thing I knew. A dad, yeah, sure, all that kind of stuff, but there was nothing else. Take that away, and then it's like, what am I? I'm a guy in a hospital? Like, I never identified with that before. I don't know what that means. And it's one of the things that helped me 8 years down the track go, okay, when somebody asks me, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I can't answer that question anymore, because I don't say that I'm this or I'm that. What I talk about is the things that I do on a daily basis. Some days I do this, and other days I do that, and I have a podcast. And they're things that I have and I involve myself with, so that my identity can't be questioned by an event or by somebody. And if somebody, and therefore what it also does, it opens up possibilities, so that when somebody says, do you want to do this, or would you do that? I don't say, no, I don't do that because I'm I'm this guy. I have a label, and I don't do those other things because I have a label. I never used to travel. I never used to do all these things. And my wife started to bring in these little experiences to take me out of this very narrow-minded view of who I was.
Yeah, sure.
And then I became somebody who loved traveling. And then I became somebody who loved trying a different food. Then I loved somebody to became somebody who could handle eating a vegetarian diet. And it didn't mean that I was a worse person for not eating meat and all this kind of junk.
Yeah.
And it's a real lovely evolution, because for the first time ever, my identity came into question, and not by the usual methods, not by mum and dad going, we don't behave that way, Bill, or anything like
Yeah.
that. It came in from, idiot, you're in bed in a
Yeah.
hospital, and it's the second time you've been here in 6 weeks for the same issue. Maybe you're not a guy who works 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe you
Yeah.
need to be a different guy,
Sure.
and then the world opens up. And then I noticed myself while I was in hospital making making more money, my turnover increasing, my days decreasing, my time on the job site decreasing, everything going down except my turnover. And I was like, what the hell have I been doing all this time? How did I have to get to this where I was in hospital to achieve these amazing things
It's crazy, isn't it?
without even trying? It's
Different
nuts.
approach. Yeah.
So how have you found yourself transitioning back into life, and what does that look like now? October wasn't that long ago, so you're pretty early on in your recovery. Where are you at?
So it's almost 11 months, so approaching the 12-month mark. Look, it's been really difficult. Take the hospital experience out of it. I kind of just expected that within 3 to 6 months, I would be normal again. I'd be myself. And when that doesn't happen, it's really hard to handle. And this recovery is not like getting a cold. It's not like, I've got a cold, but tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll be okay, because that's generally what happens. You have a cold and then next week you're fine. It's not really the case with this. I've explained it to people as it's more of a quarter by quarter comparison. So, for example, the start of this year, I'd take my son to school and we'd cross this busy road and I'd have to hold on to whatever was on the footpath, so like a phone box or a pole, or I'd put my hand on it for balance to look each way, and that would be how we'd get across the road. But I often think now when I'm crossing the road, it's now September, 3 quarters on, I don't have to touch that phone box. So that to me is progress, but that's 9 months. That's obscene when you're someone that's used to being results driven, and if I do this will happen. I've done nothing wrong. I've done everything people have told me to do in this recovery. So stroke survivors, get psychology, get into nature, exercise, eat well. I've done it all, and nothing you do speeds this up. So except probably rest, and rest isn't my strong point. So where I am now, I guess, is I'm a lot more accepting of what's happened. I'm not resisting it. Like you say, it opens the doors to other things, and I'm probably enjoying life more than I was before because I've slowed down and I can take things in. I've had so much time with my kids. My son started a new school this year, so I've pretty much been there for every drop-off and pick-up. And prior to that, when I was working, I don't think I'd probably be at school maybe twice a term. So I guess, just little things like that. And my prior life, I wouldn't have wanted to be at school, but now I find enjoyment in that. And, you make friends with people and you make stronger relationships, because obviously I'm quite open. And for the first half of this year, I thought I had stroke written all over my face. So anyone I met, I'd, almost use it as a disclaimer and say, I had a stroke in October. So if I'm looking at you funny or if I look like I'm off balance, there's not, that's why there's something wrong with me. And that's so silly because physically I wasn't really affected. And you can't tell by looking at me that where my head is at and how my foggy brain operates. But so I've got to the point where I'm not having to really throw that disclaimer out there in the first sentence of meeting someone. But, when you are vulnerable, people tell you about their vulnerabilities. And I've had so many conversations this year that I wouldn't have had in my previous life. And it's just opened my eyes to how rushed and stressed and perhaps how I was doing it wrong before. Because, I don't know how I'd go with that, talking to all these different people on a weekly basis. And it's just kind of nicer.
It's so nice. I completely
Yeah,
relate to you. I was 37. How old were you?
35.
Yeah, it's nuts, right? I was 37. My kids were, one of them was a teenager, one of them was in grade 6. So I was going through the whole, what are my kids thinking and worrying about and all that kind of stuff. And while they were thinking and worrying all those things, I was able to be with them, and therefore they were able to be less worried and less
Sure.
concerned. Of course, they were worried when they saw me in hospital twice in 6 weeks for, all up for about, 10 or 11 days. But then I had a good opportunity to start pulling my head in and going and doing things like, when Dad was an idiot, a couple of weeks ago, I'm sorry. When when I did that stupid thing 2 years ago, like, I know now it was stupid. And I started to build this connection with them that was like you did with the people that you've met. And I've done it with heaps of people, right, that I didn't know. But I also got to do it with my kids. And then that next thing that it allowed me to do was go, if this ends badly and I go to wherever, I'm good. I've done what I needed to do. Now, I had 3 years before surgery, nearly, almost 3 years. And therefore, I just ramped up, hugging and apologizing and telling everybody what a dickhead I had been and how I apologized for all the stupid things that I had done. And then that brought me closer to my circle of people who I was around all day, every day, that I was mistreating because I was stressed, tired, short of time, and running these stories that were created in my head. When my head switched off, it completely switched off. Like, I couldn't connect to it and make up bullshit stories like that anymore. And I started to notice my heart actually in my chest. I actually physically noticed something in my chest for the first time. And I wondered, what the hell is this? Like, what am I feeling in my chest? It was my heart. And those conversations that were pouring out were waiting there. They're sitting in the background while my head's doing all its bullshit for 37 years. And then eventually they got a chance to come out and talk and say what they had to say. And then I felt at ease with everything. And I knew that my kids, if I croaked it, would not say, we had a dad, he was a good bloke, but he was always kind of pissed off and angry.
Yeah, sure.
And I was then highly motivated to be the guy that, I know parents screw up their kids. That's just our job. That's part of what we do. But I was going to be the guy that was going to minimize the amount of damage that I was going to do to my kids as much as I possibly can, knowing that I can't control anything other than my behavior, how I behave. Pickups, drop-offs, schools, cooking. When I got the energy, my wife would go to work. In the morning, I'd go out, pick up a few things from the shopping centre and prepare the meal so that when they all came home at around 6:30, food was ready to go. Everyone got to eat. I'd be exhausted most days that I did that. But if I broke it up and planned it properly, it meant that we could eat together as a family, not rushed, and not sitting down to cook dinner and prepare dinner at 7:00.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I had never experienced that life in all our married years, and with the kids, I had never experienced that type of old school, old style family life,
Yeah.
And I would have traded my job for being able to just stay at home and be a stay-at-home dad if my awesome clients didn't keep calling me, but also if we were financially better off, right? I would have just gone, I'm done. I'm going to be
Yeah.
a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
300 and, like 180-degree turn is just completely improved my life so many ways. And I had all these issues that I never had before, stroke
Yeah.
issues. Like most people
Yeah.
wouldn't think that that's an improvement on your life.
Yeah. It's like a newfound harmony.
Yeah. And it came from this massive amount of, what do we call it? Like chaos. Like it came
Mm.
from chaos and
Yeah.
disaster.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful place to be in. And I'm kind of still there, like I haven't really adjusted back. I haven't really gone back to my old ways too much. Of course, sometimes I work too many hours, but
Yeah.
sometimes I have to. But I'm aware that I'm doing that because I've just got to get by for that particular time. And then I'm going to go back to the new way of doing things, not the crazy
Sure.
old way.
Yeah. And so great to have that perspective, which I don't think anyone can truly understand. I can't put it into words, uh, and the old me wouldn't have understood it.
Yeah.
Like it was all about status and how high you can get on the corporate ladder, and how many sports you can have your kids down for, and every night of the week, are we doing all the extracurricular we need to? And you wear everybody out. You wear the kids out. You wear yourself out. Yeah, I reason with you.
Yeah. And then you wonder why kids become hyper vigilant and why they come
Mm,
always obsessed to put their head in a device or whatever, because they've had enough of you. They don't want to bloody listen to your bullshit anymore.
yeah,
And they want a distraction, and they'll take it wherever they can get it,
sure.
And my kids stopped playing sport. I was devastated when they stopped playing sport. What do you mean you're not going to play sport? And really made them feel bad about not playing sport anymore. And it
Mm,
was terrible that I did that to them, because it started off as something that we're going to do for fun.
yeah,
And then I made it about me, and I clued on that as soon as I made it about me, they were like, "No, I'm out of here."
yeah. But it's also having the time to understand what your kids are into. So, I've had extra time to watch my children and go, you really like making comics. And it's, if you're stressed all the time and busy, you don't have the time to sit down and really understand what is it that these kids like to do. And you just assume that they like um, what they're supposed to like or what society says they're supposed to like, I guess.
Yeah, and you impose your model of the world on them.
Mm,
You
yes.
then get kids that resent you because, like, I don't like doing that stuff that you like doing. Why should I do that?
Yeah, sure.
And it's a strange gift. Stroke can be a strange gift, and I'm not saying that it's easy, and I'm not saying that it's pleasant, and I'm not saying that you should like it, especially early on. Absolutely not. You should feel every emotion and go through all the trauma and all the troubles and all the anger and everything. You should do it all, and then when the dust settles,
Mm,
you reflect back and look at how you've changed and how you've evolved and become a better
mm,
version of yourself because of this lesson that didn't take your life, that just came as a reminder that
mm.
shit has to change.
Yeah, I agree.
How do the kids deal with it?
Um, yeah, obviously, like you, the hospital stay. It's not great to see your mum in a hospital bed. Um, but at the same time, I don't look any different. So from that perspective, I guess it's been lucky. If I was struggling physically, then I think it would have impacted on them a little bit more. However, in saying that, old mum has gone and there's this new mum that gets really tired, and um, you know I've only recently just been able to start kicking the football with my son, or any sort of neck movement up until about 9 months, up until about the 9-month mark, just made me dizzy and made me feel sick and set off vertigo. So I am different, but I think it's a blessing that they don't see it. And um, I like to think I'm pretty tough and deal with it internally. And yes, I might go to bed at 8 o'clock every night, but that's not impacting on them. Um, I'm home and I can help with their homework. I can help with their research projects. I can take them to the school and pick up and drop off. And so I think probably their life's probably got better. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, there's definitely times where I know my daughter, she's 5. She probably feels it a bit more than my son, who's 8. Whether that's a female intuition type thing. She, I think, is struggling with it a bit more. She doesn't like seeing mummy tired, and um, I think it's sort of just worn off a bit more on her. So she senses that I'm struggling some days, and
Mm.
yeah, she's regressed a little bit in some areas, but I think she starts school in January, so hopefully when she's got a full structured day and a full week where she's busy and wearing herself out, that might improve. But yeah, on the whole, I've been quite lucky.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? Like 5-year-old child just
Mm,
dials straight in, knows exactly what's going on,
mm.
and can feel what you're feeling, and then doesn't and has enough awareness and consciousness to say, no, I don't like it when mum's tired.
She, yeah, I was talking to a neighbour the other day and explaining obviously what had happened to me and why I'm not working at the moment. I said I had a stroke last year, and my daughter was standing next to me, and she looked up and she said it was in October, and I sort of thought, oh, okay, yep, it was. So they listen to everything, and maybe I need to be a bit more aware of that because she's probably heard the story multiple times.
Yeah. My kids probably got sick of me talking about it, and I used to
Mm,
do the same thing to you. As you, I would tell people that I had the stroke because sometimes I would just fade out, like while I was talking to
mm,
them, or I couldn't get the word out, or I would get stuck in
yep.
my speech or whatever, And I would tell people, and often it would come up when I was eating because I really changed my diet a lot. So to decrease inflammation, I really changed my diet. So part of what happens in the brain is the stroke happens, and then there's an area around it. There's a technical term for it, I don't know what it is, where
Mm,
the deficit is happening from, as well as the area that's actually physically died, and that area is the area that's going to come back over time as
mm,
things get better. Inflammation goes away, the healing happens, it comes better, right? So I wanted to take control of something that I could, and what I could take control of was what I used to eat, and my diet wasn't the best before. Coke, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 cans a day, uh,
yeah.
smoking, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that somebody should never indulge in one of those things, but really sugars like that, they don't really help. They increase the fatigue.
Mm,
So
sure.
we would go to places and I would have a salad and grilled chicken and
Yeah.
a mineral water with a little bit of lemon in there. And people would go to me, "Oh, are we going to have dessert?" And I go, "No, I'm good." And they're like, "Oh, don't you have dessert?" "No, I don't need to." And then I would try and avoid the conversation for as long as I could. And then eventually I'd say, "Look, I had a stroke, blah, 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 blah." My kids, if
Yeah.
they were sitting there, their eyes would be rolling back because then the conversation goes to the next level.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're thinking, "Oh my God, here we go. We've heard this again."
Yeah.
And of course I did you guys need to stop eating sugar so much,
Yeah.
for as much. And they were like, "Oh my God, listen to this guy's going on and on and on." And eventually what happened was I just let them be themselves. And I just
Yeah.
stood up and I led by example without preaching.
Mm,
And then I just accepted that they'll come to their version of of you know of s- of balance in their own way. But at least they've got somebody to refer back to when they they have a question to ask about something that's troubling them that was similar to me when I was
mm.
in trouble. With your daughter, I mean, what a great example to set to a 5-year-old. When you're tired, you rest. When you feel
Yeah.
unwell, you rest instead of soldier on with
Yeah.
cudgel, take a bloody
True.
pill, go to
Yeah.
work and smash another 5 hours out.
Yeah.
What a great example. What you know about stroke recovery and how your brain heals, you know that it happens when you rest. What we want for our daughters and our boys when they're recovering from being unwell is we want them to rest. And
Mm,
when they're growing and we want their growing brains to grow as healthily as possible, we want them to rest as much as possible because that at night is when the gold happens. It happens when we sleep. There's an awesome book called Why We Sleep. I forget the guy's name, but I'll bring it up in a sec. And he talks about how at night the cells decrease in size. They kind of shrink and they separate from each other, and they allow the cerebral fluid to get up into the cells and do this kind of a wash and drain all the toxins out of the brain and get it out into the excretory system. That only happens at night when you're doing REM sleep.
Yeah, amazing.
Right? And
Yeah.
stroke survivors will tell you that they often struggle to sleep after a stroke, and it's all sorts of reasons why. If they dial that down, if they can get their sleep cycle kicking in and better, they're doing so much to support their brain in recovery, more than they would if they, more than they could ever imagine that it does for them. It is such a fascinating thing that people, especially in Australia, probably in other Western countries, go, yeah, I only slept 3 hours last night. I mean, I don't need to sleep more than 3 hours. I'm good to go. Dude, like, stroke survivors, the more you sleep, the better.
Yeah, definitely.
You're in that really cool phase of knowing how if we transfer what happened in our brain and how to heal the brain into the how to develop a brain, like you're in a really cool space because you're learning about how to get yourself feeling good. Take that, put that into a child's brain, and then bang, you've got an amazing, healthy, creative child with a really, really sort of happening brain.
Yeah, I often equate myself to my 5-year-old in many different ways. Because basically I'm retraining my brain. She's developing her brain. And at night I have this little ritual where I balance on one leg on a piece of foam to help with my cerebellum repair and balance. And she sees me doing it. And, last night she's trying to stand on it with me. And she could probably almost do it better than me. But, like, how good's that to teach a 5-year-old to balance on a piece of foam? Like, that's difficult. And, my son, who's 8, can't do it all that well. But it's, I'm doing something that an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old can't really do that well.
Yeah.
So just, it's so I try and teach them to do it too. And like, we can all do it together.
And it's really helpful. People don't realize how helpful that is, but that means that if you can balance better, that means you're less likely to fall. That means your core is activated better, which if your core's activated better, then when you get a dizzy spell, you can, stabilize yourself. You can make sure that you've got a little bit of time to respond and react. So it's amazing. And the kids, a lot of them don't have that because they don't exercise enough. And I'm not saying now take them and do 10 times more exercise, but they don't exercise enough because they're sitting down too much. Their bellies aren't activated, and they should be able to stand on one leg on a piece of foam. Like, they're kids. They're the ones that are going to be able to do it better than anybody. But look, it's not about it. It's lovely that you're in that stage where you see how this thing that you're doing to help yourself is rubbing off. Like, it's a beautiful thing, and you do it together.
Nice.
Mum and daughter,
it's nice.
connecting over balancing on a piece of foam.
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought? Hey, well, stretching on the ground and throwing a tennis ball against the wall, trying to catch it on one leg, and I think balance is good for kids too.
Yeah,
their coordination.
Who in your family was the worst? The worst in a crisis? For me, it was my dad. Like, the time I ended up in hospital the first time, he he forgot to take his blood pressure tablet or something. Collapsed at the house and came to hospital in an ambulance.
All because you weren't there.
Because he found out that I was unwell in hospital.
Yeah.
He went to water, and then he just ended up in hospital, and I was in the stroke ward, and I had to come down to see my dad come to visit me in hospital in the emergency room, connected to heart machines and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, right. That's crazy. Funnily enough, my 84-year-old grandma was in hospital, the same hospital around the corner from me when I was in hospital after having the stroke. But I don't think it's for the reason your dad was. It was more so some heart fluttering. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was walking around with a walking frame to visit her room, to try and get moving and get better and get back to work and get life back to normal.
That's what I was doing. Who
Yeah.
else was who else was terrible in a crisis around you?
Um,
Or wasn't there anybody?
I don't think really there was anybody. I mean, it's been a learning process for everyone. There's no history of stroke in our family at all.
Mm.
Um, and I guess people are dealing with it in different ways. But, my husband's seen it from the beginning, from that night in my bed when I was on a roller coaster to, now being able to fill my days with more things. And I think he's managed the process really well and has been positive through the whole thing. I can't really fault him in the crisis. I mean, I guess what I've found difficult is, it's such an invisible problem, and people want you to be normal and people want you to be better. So, I think my mum is this super positive, optimistic lady that, you can't really get her down at all. Like, it's amazing. And in the early days, we didn't know stroke recovery was a 1 to 2 year thing. We thought it's just a small obstacle you need to get over. And he should be like, okay, so maybe on the weekend we can do this, this, and this. And I'd be like, yep, okay. And then we'd get to the weekend and it would be, one of the bad days of the week, and we physically just need to be in a quiet room, and you're not much fun to anybody. And I'd have to say, no, I can't do that. And I think that's been the hardest part, is me thinking I'm letting people down, or having to say no to friends. Like, I don't want them to stop inviting me, but come out for dinner at 7:00 on the weekend, and I'll be thinking, but I go to bed at 8:00, and it's really hard to. Sometimes I kind of wish I had a sign to put on my head to say, not normal. Or, I was walking down the beach last night and I was thinking maybe I should get a T-shirt printed that on the back says, I had a stroke, I walk slow. Or it's that trying to get other people to understand what you're going through. And while everyone's been great in a crisis, like beyond great, it's like they can't understand it, and it's only a stroke survivor can.
Yeah, my wife's been on that journey now as well, as long as I have. And at the beginning, it was really difficult. I do remember her saying to me, like, it's getting old, enough.
Yeah.
And me getting really offended about that, and thinking that she was telling me, to get over it and just, be better. And she wasn't really saying that. She was really saying it's getting old for her, that she's struggling through not having me the way that she remembers me being, and all that kind of stuff. And not wanting to go out in public because too much noise was affecting me, or on a particular day I'd be wasted or whatever. And I remember traveling overseas one year, and Christine's amazing. She's the kind of person who, if you want to go overseas, just give her a buzz and she'll itinerary the whole thing for you to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Not one thing. There's no one thing that you'll miss. However, what that means is that I don't get time to just do nothing when I'm overseas, because she's overseas and it took us so long to get there, and money and all that stuff. I want to see as much as I can. And I'm like, man, I can't do that. Like, I need a day where I'm doing nothing.
Yeah.
At least please give me one of those so that I can do those other things the next day,
Yeah.
So we would go somewhere and I would say to her, listen, tomorrow, do not expect me to be up and about all day to do all those things that you've planned. Don't expect it. There's no chance.
Yeah.
And she'd go, all right. Begrudgingly, she'd go, all right, And then if I had a good night's sleep and woke up feeling well, I'd say to her, all those things that you wanted to do today, they're on, baby. Let's go. And she'd go, are you sure? Are you just doing that because you want to make me happy, or you do? No, I'm feeling really good. I want to do them. Let's go. Let's strike while the iron's hot, And we started it took some time, but we started to get to that point just through a lot of conversation about how it made me feel, how fatigue made me feel, and me reminding her about how fatigued, when she was fatigued a couple of times, for example, in her life, how it felt. Well, when I reminded her of how when you were fatigued and completely wiped out, remember that day? Well, that's how I feel most days, So that was the only way for me to get an understanding
Yeah.
across, and for her to go, oh, okay, I can relate to that. And I'd say to her, like, and it happens all the freaking time, and I can't stop it from happening, and I can't
Yeah.
just rest and switch it off,
Yeah.
And then,
And you can't predict it.
yeah, which is the worst
Yeah.
part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I would do is go to parties, and I would hang out like on a stool on my own in the corner, just
Mm.
try and quietly get out of, the busyness of the party, and just try and be there so that people could say, oh, he came, and then maybe they wouldn't notice me sneak away into the corner and just sit quietly and just chill.
Yeah, sure.
And that made it easier for me to be there a little bit longer,
Yeah.
and then not make them feel like, Bill never rocks up anymore. Because
Yeah.
people who are living outside of the house are even harder to
Yeah.
bring on board and make them understand. The ones living in the house are doing it hard enough, but the ones outside the house even worse. And then what I found was that as I sort of stretched my being out time from 8 to 8:30,
Mm.
then I realized where my new normal was, and then it started to creep up and creep up. And I don't enjoy being out till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning at all anymore. I
Yeah.
can't, because then I
Yeah.
don't sleep enough hours to feel good in the morning.
Yeah.
But if I had to, I can get through it if I had
Yeah.
to now. But back then, we often sort of said, it's 11 o'clock, I'm going home. Thanks for
Yeah.
having us. We
And
can't,
there's nothing wrong with that,
no.
you know?
And my friends didn't understand, and how could they? The only way they're going to understand is if
Mm.
they have a stroke, and bloody hell, we don't want anyone to understand
No.
us that way.
No. It's kind of like being a baby or like a young child is sometimes how I explain it. In they need their rest. They get to have a play date and they play for 2 hours straight, and then they all end up piled up on top of each other. It's almost like they've drunk too much alcohol. It's like that tipping point. And you need that rest to regenerate. And yeah, it's very much like being a child. It's like
Yeah.
having an immature brain again.
Yeah. I used to always, I also then took it upon myself to use it to my advantage a couple of times as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I did something stupid, I would say, hey, guys, I've had a stroke, relax.
Yeah. You get away with more.
Yeah. And then after about 5 years, I kind of got,
Yeah.
enough of that bull.
You've used that excuse too many times.
Yeah. How are your work colleagues? Being that they're all from hospitals, like how are they sort of relating to you now that you haven't been back to work?
Um, I couldn't ask for a better response from them. They, right from the beginning, I've got different contacts there that I speak to regularly, and some have said from the beginning, this is a 12-month journey for you. And I'd laugh and be like, no, it's definitely not. How dare you say that? I'd almost get offended.
Yeah.
But then I had one that straight up said to me, you need to treat this like it's maternity leave, and people take 12 months off to go and have a baby. And obviously she knew that I'd had children while working, and I sort of listened to that and thought, yep, okay, I can do that. You don't lose what you know through maternity leave. You get back, and there's a bit of a transition period to get back from the fog. But yeah, like we have recently had some chats, and we've got a bit of a plan in place to start up in a couple of weeks. But yeah, with some limitations. So as I approach the 12-month mark, there's no way I would have even been considering taking on work, even probably 3 months ago. But something's turned a corner at some point, which I can't quite identify. And also just the more people you speak to, they give you that 2 years, don't they? And they say you've got 2 years to technically rebuild the brain cells, or do as much as you can in your recovery. And while physically it's been tough this last 12 months, and a lot of the time I don't know if I'm standing up or where I am in space, but as that improves with my phone balancing, you know, I want to start pushing the mental side of it. And intellectually, I know I can still do the job. It's whether I have the stamina, the fatigue allows it, whether cognitively I can be as quick as I used to be. So all those, you know, all those little challenges are going to be coming up, and yeah, it's all a bit unknown, which is a bit scary.
Yeah.
But I won't know unless I try. So I want to use those 2 years to jam in as much as I can, because that's my mentality is go, go, go. And I don't want to regret anything. So I don't want to get to 2 years and mentally say, oh, well, that's my recovery done. I didn't try hard enough to get my cognitive thinking going. And
Yeah.
so I guess, yeah, I've got a bit of a challenge, a different phase of the recovery coming up. And I'm expecting it to be very, very tough. And, you know, I've been told by, you know, the professionals and the people I work with, lay low on the weekends, like this is going to be hard for you. Don't expect it to be easy. But yeah, it's something I do want to try. I don't want to leave it. I'm not ready to close the door.
Yeah,
put it that
absolutely.
way.
No, I agree with you. See, I was never a office kind of guy. I always worked outdoors because we had a property maintenance business, and I still have it.
Sure.
And that business I was unable to go back to it fully for many years. And at around the 6-year mark, I was completely wiped out, or probably about around the 5.5-year mark, which was about a year and a half after brain surgery. I was completely wiped out. But I was wiped out through an issue with my thyroid, which creates neurological fatigue the same way as the strokes did. And they just happen to one come after the other, right? And I went into an office for the first time in a long time, in probably the first time in about 15 years, to do an office job. And I remember sitting in front of a screen and trying to get through the first hour or two, and then being wiped out completely, and then struggling to get through the rest of the day and recover and do all those things. And then as time went on, I ended up being employed there for just less than 3 years. As time went on, the ability to stay in front of the screen and do those heavy lifting with my brain, you know, thinking and solving problems on a computer, started to increase, and it started to get better and better. And it was like it was like a physical recovery of the brain, in that before that that part of the brain recovery couldn't have happened if I didn't sit in front of a computer. So I had to do the stuff that I was doing outside of an office, which was happening, you know, through rehab, through my nutrition, through all those things. But then there was this part that I had to do, which I didn't realize at the time, but reflecting on it now, which was in front of the computer. And that slowly allowed my mind to get more resilient at dealing with bright lights in an office and all that kind of stuff. And I asked them to switch off the 2 lights that were on top of my head.
Sure.
And we put a filter over the screen, and I wore glasses with a filter.
Yeah.
And everything that I did added just a little bit more time to my day, so that by the end of the 3-year mark, I was no problem, you know, like any other staff member, able to be completely functional for 8 hours a day and productive for them and do my job. They were extremely helpful in taking me down that path. I didn't have the awareness of having the conversation with them again at the beginning, and saying, you know, my brain doesn't do well with lots of light, fluorescent light, and it doesn't do well with lots of noise. So I didn't create the right environment for a healing brain when they get back to work. But you're in a situation where you can have a conversation about that, and they already understand that because they're medical people. So you're really you're well set up to achieve success in that space, and don't put a timeline on it. I know people talk about 2 years, but it might be 3, it might be 4. Others might come back and things might work in 6 months. Other things might not work
Mm.
for different amount of time. So I found that by not having a deadline on those types of things, but having little goals, it worked better, because my goal was, for example, to be able to be productive for 8 hours at work, but I didn't put a timeline on when.
Yeah, sure.
That takes the pressure off, and then it doesn't make me feel like I failed at
Yeah,
the 24-month mark, you know?
yeah, sure. I think it's I've listened to a lot of podcasts during this time, and I heard something on one a little while ago, and you go, okay, so I want to achieve this. So, and that might be a particular role, a particular number of hours a day, whatever it may be, but it may seem daunting. And, to me, going back to work is a little bit daunting, but it's all about breaking it down into steps. So think about where you are now. That's step A. Step B is, do your 3 hours a day in the morning, 2 days a week. And then once you get to B, you go to C, instead of saying, oh, well, I've got to get from A to E. And that's for anything in life, really.
Yeah.
Looking at A to E, well, it can be quite overwhelming, and you have to get to B, C, and D before you can get to E. So I'm just trying to take that approach in really not looking too far ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'll get there. You continue to recover and turn corners all the time. Like I spoke about it, I think it was just maybe a couple of weeks ago on one of my posts on Instagram, I spoke about how I've turned another corner, and in COVID, I've been able to actually focus. So actually sitting at work and working in a computer is one thing, but focusing for extended periods of time is another thing. And for me, that's another layer to the being able to sit in front of a computer and work, being able to sit there and focus without distraction. Like, that's another level, right?
Sure.
So I found myself, because I'm in Melbourne, we've been in lockdown for 37 years. And we're still in lockdown, and I don't know if we're ever going to get out of bloody lockdown.
Yeah.
But I've been really productive in this last 6-week block, and focused, really focused. And normally I wouldn't be able to do that, where I find myself spending 12 hours a day in front of the computer with breaks and coffee breaks and all that kind of stuff, but without even noticing that I did it, and not feeling like shit at the end of it.
Yeah.
And it's doing work that I love. Don't get me wrong. It's all about the podcast, right? I'm putting courses together. I'm thinking about meditation challenges that I can create for people. I'm thinking about who I'm going to interview next, and transcribing it and doing all that kind of stuff. But that just happened in the last 6 weeks. And I've been doing this podcast since 2015. And it's been a bloody pain in the ass struggle the entire time. But the value and the joy that I get out of it made it impossible for me to stop. But nonetheless, like, I haven't been able to focus on it, and it was happening. Episodes would happen intermittently, and all the work that I was doing would happen just infrequently. And now it's kind of been like just bang, like on point. So I'm 8 years down, and you still turn corners all the time.
So it does happen. So you really have to expose yourself to it to train your brain again, which is what I keep getting told by the doctors. And it's another phase. It's, if you don't try, you're not going to know. So.
And you're early on, Amy. I mean, you're so early on. And what I want to say to you is, and we haven't spoken about it a bit, so maybe we can, like, how did you, and I'll ask the question, and then I'll explain why I'm asking it. So my question's going to be, at the end of this little next section, it's going to be how you're dealing with it psychologically. And because dealing with it psychologically, for me, then also offers another level of leveling up, and another turning point in how my brain heals. I know it sounds weird, but if I deal with my psychological issues, then the healing in my brain happens differently and better, and takes another level. So how have you experienced did you do the whole, oh my God, I'm mortal thing?
Yeah, I think I went through phases. So I don't know, it's kind of like grief, isn't it? I don't know those 7 phases off by heart. But yeah, there was denial for sure. That was the hospital phase. And then there was a fear phase, and then which brought on anxiety. So because that day when the stroke happened, I remember how I felt. I felt like I was getting a virus. I felt like I was getting a cold. And I had a really sore neck, like someone was sitting on my shoulders. And, you know, anytime I feel a little twinge in my neck, I would go doom. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have another stroke. And that's kind of past now, but that was awful. That was, you know, that's only just sort of passed in the last 2 months. And the more people that tell me, the physios, the GPs, the neurologists, you know, these dissections are quite rare to happen twice, especially in the same spot. And, you know, you could have professors telling me that. I still wouldn't believe it. I'll be the one that has it twice. And so there's that fear. There was frustration. There's still frustration. You know, if I exercise for more than 20 minutes, I get dizzy. So if I live quite near the beach, I can handle 20 minutes. If I went for 30 minutes, that dizziness would start kicking in, which brings on a bit of anxiety. What if I fall over out in public? So that's bizarre because I have exercised a lot in my life. I kind of live for it. You know, I used to teach aerobics at one point. I've played different sports. I like long distance running, and to not be able to do that is also a loss of identity, which has been awfully frustrating. And yeah, I guess with the fear, with the frustration, with the denial, eventually you have to accept and, you know, move on, and this is how it is now. So sort of reconfigure your life to how it is, or keep dwelling on what happened. So psychologically, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, like hands down. Just wow, like you cannot describe it to anybody. It's a roller coaster. And like you say, you might wake up one morning feeling like you're blacked out for the day. I can't do anything today. But along with that comes frustration and fear and, oh, I feel really tired today, but I didn't do much yesterday. So does that mean I'm going backwards? And, you know, back in January this year, I might have had 5 bad days and 2 semi-good days in the week. But I can say now that those bad days are nowhere near as bad. So I'm very rarely sort of bed bound now. A bad day might be just staying home, doing not much and resting and sitting on the couch a bit more. But I think I, you know, tend to have maybe 4 good days a week. So it does shift, and that helps you psychologically as well when you see those shifts and when you can cross the road without holding on to the phone box. But it's slow and it's tedious, and you have to be very patient, and all of these things I am not, or I was not. So I'm a different person. Yeah, it is a complete 180. I now have to be patient. I have to be calm. There's nothing I can do that's going to speed this up. And I saw a psychologist straight up after the stroke happened because I was told, you know, get some psychology. That's what stroke survivors do. So I saw one, and she was good at the time, but now I've switched to a new one who uses the David Schwartz technique. It's about internal family systems and labeling the parts of your body, and I'm finding it really, really effective. Okay. So it's, yeah, we focus on why have you got that pushy part. You know, you've had a stroke, you can rest. It is okay to rest, but I'll sit on the couch and I'll look at the ceiling and I'll say, that ceiling looks really dirty. It needs painting. We're going to paint the ceiling. So I'll call my dad up and he'll come over and we'll paint the ceiling. And the psychologist will say, okay, that we don't want to be painting ceilings. We need to address this pushy part and we try and isolate it, talk to it. So I'm having a bit of success with that. I've only seen her 3 times, but I think psychologically your podcasts have been really good, particularly like the ones where you've spoken to other survivors that have had the vertebral artery dissections, because it's, you know, I can relate to it, and also the young girls that are in their 30s. And I've made friends with Kelly, and we talk a bit on Instagram. But it's a new life, and I'm much clearer about what matters to me now, and I am a better person, and there are silver linings, and there will continue to be silver linings. But where I'm going to go and what I'm going to be, I think there's lots of possibilities. And as I start to feel better and my focus gets better and my brain's less foggy, I kind of want to use this experience for the better. Like, I want people to know, and kind of like what you've done. There's people out there you can help, and I want to share, and I kind of want to show the world that just because something bad happens to you, you can overcome it. And I'm not sure how that looks right now, but yeah.
That looks perfect. It looks as a way that it needs to look for right now, for nearly a year out. And what an example you're setting for your children. You don't take those things lying down, and you don't just fall into a ball of mess and then just hope that your life is over and blame things. Blame everything on this one experience. Like, it's not what you do. It's the 7 stages of grief are shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, the upward turn, reconstruction and working through, and acceptance and hope. I mean, you've gone through all of those, and what happens is, what I found was that you cycle through them one at a time, again and again and again. When I went through it, shock and denial, every time I wanted to do that old thing that I used to do again, freaking hell, I can't do that still. Why can't I do it? And for me, it was bike riding, and I used to love riding my bike. And I don't ride it like those guys in Lycra or anything like that. I just ride it just for the sake of riding. And I remember getting back on my bike and then my foot falling off the pedal because I couldn't feel my foot, and then the pedal scraping my shin and destroying my shin. Then I got a stirrup. I tied my foot onto the pedal, and then I would go to put my foot down. When I stopped the bike, forget that my foot was in the stirrup, not get my foot down, fall over. Oh my God, I can't do that either. And then I discovered, so I went through all those processes, and then I discovered electric bikes, which meant that my left foot didn't get tired. It didn't need to be in a stirrup. And now I can ride because the motor is doing most of the work, and I don't have to worry about falling or any of that stuff. And I'm back. And that took 4 years to get to that point,
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to, like you, I wasn't just going to accept the fact that, no, I can't do that and that's not going to happen. Because just before I bought the 2-wheeled electric bike, I was considering a 3-wheeled regular bike, because that meant that even if I got tired, I didn't have to worry about resting and stopping myself from falling. But I discovered this electric bike. So, we get there, we go through the cycle over and over again, and you'll get there. One of the things that I do want to mention and discuss with you is just that idea that when you get to the 30-minute mark of exercising, that you're going to start feeling dizzy again and sick. How much of that is the fact that you're getting there and you're getting sick, or the fact that you're expecting yourself to get there and getting sick and therefore making that happen? Now, I could be wrong, right? But if there's an expectation and an anxiety level that builds up at 30-minute mark, what makes you think that you're not setting that up at around the 15-minute mark and then creating the environment to trigger you at 30 minutes? Because your body will do what you set it up to do and what you tell it to do, right? So when your body realizes that 30 minutes are up, it's going to go, she's expecting this, let's give her this.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but a lot of people have these ideas, again, that they create in their brain, in their head, about what it means, what all this stuff means, and the meaning they give to it, they might live up to. So be careful the meaning that you give to things, because if that meaning is not a supportive one and you're living up to it and you're not noticing, well, you might be the person who's getting in the way of your own recovery.
Possibly, yeah.
And I was that guy, because I used to do that to I used to do that to my wife. I used to sometimes have those days where I talk about, how I'm never going to do this again and I'm never going to do that again. And I would just devastate her. And I realized that I was never doing those things because I was the one that was saying that. She wasn't saying that to me. It was me. And I was living up to my words. And
Mm.
as a result, I created one of the presentations that I did for a group probably a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 years ago, was a presentation that I've labeled "Words Are Like Weapons." They wound sometimes, and I talk about how one of the people that I was in recovery with was calling his hand a bastard, and every time he called it a bastard, it didn't do what he wanted to do. As soon as he changed those words to friend, that hand moved and did what it wanted him to do. Like, it was one word. The time difference was 30 seconds, and the achievement was dramatic improvement in his ability to move his hand just because of that word.
Yeah.
So he was setting himself up, because a bastard hand is not a supportive one. It doesn't do what you want it to do. It does what it lives up to what you call it.
Yeah.
So when you
True.
called it his friend, man, that was a compliant hand. It didn't
Yeah.
have perfect function, but it was just compliant.
Yeah. I've been told it's a bit similar, but speak to yourself like you're a child or like you're a baby. Don't be so aggressive and don't be so so angry towards yourself. So, and yeah, I've actually got it written on a pink post-it note from a psychologist that says, speak to yourself in a kind manner like you would to a little person.
And and don't speak to yourself in a tone and voice that you would never speak to another person in.
Mm.
You wouldn't speak to your friend like that. Why would you just speak to
Yeah.
yourself like that? It's a really important thing to remember, and just catch yourself out when you're doing it. That doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect. That just means that you have a bit more awareness. And when you do act up and treat yourself harshly, you can go, all right, you know what? I'm all right. I forgive myself. I'm sorry for speaking that way. And you can just get on with it, What I love about what you said is that you've connected with Kelly, and you guys are friends and you talk from time to time because of my podcast. I mean, my God, that is amazing to hear. I
Yeah.
really loved that you said that. It's the most brilliant thing that I never expected would come out of a podcast, that I would connect people and help people find other people that they could relate to that were like them. And there was another time that happened to me, was when somebody asked me from New York whether I knew any stroke survivors in New York. And I said, yeah, I do. I know about 4. And I was able to connect somebody who's in New York who didn't know any stroke survivors to stroke survivors that were in New York, and I'm on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
It was next
Small
level.
world, hey?
Yeah.
No, we have a lot in common. And she's in Hawaii at the moment, about to move back to mainland America. And I just recently moved house. So we're kind of just going through a lot of the same stuff. When she turns her neck, her eyes make her feel dizzy, and it's similar to what I experience. And she does some really good, like, Instagram stuff about her physical recovery and different exercises. And she's quite inspiring. Inspiring person.
Yeah, she's lost a heap of weight. She realized that maybe she was eating way too much and indulging way too much on, those things that we love, but
Yeah.
potentially don't support us. And she does a lot of awesome exercises. She had a stroke at 32.
Yeah.
She was on episode 99. Kelly, I can never pronounce her surname.
Keating. Yeah.
Something like that. And she was just really, really cool to interview as well, because she was so young and she has so much. She's so inspired, to overcome and get better and achieve, and then also help others. And it's just brilliant that everyone's helping everyone. I mean, that is the one thing that stroke survivors seem to do heaps of, is just That's it. I know something. I learned one thing that helped me. I'm going to tell everybody about it.
Yeah, and you should, because it's hard.
Mm.
It's so hard. I think you're doing a great job. Keep it up. I really love listening to them.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, do me a favor. When this one comes out, listen to this as if you're not the same person, just so
Yeah.
that you can have this third person perspective
Yeah.
of your own stories that you're telling yourself about this recovery, right?
Yeah.
It's a
That's going to be psychologically hard, because I'll just want to criticize, you know, like,
It'll be the next level of learning. And you know what? And then tell your husband when he's on the way to work one day or wherever he goes in the car to put it on and have a bit of a listen, because that will also help him in this process of understanding you, having a conversation to a stroke survivor, which he doesn't ever hear. He doesn't ever hear this backwards and forwards between two stroke survivors. It's going to give him a better understanding as well. And hopefully it'll help him with the things that he's feeling that I imagine he hasn't really been so upfront in telling you about. You know, carers tend to be stoic, but I reckon they need to be given the permission to be vulnerable as well, and to feel like they're freaking over it or whatever.
Yeah, definitely over it.
Yeah. Amy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've had a great chat. It's been really good. Thank you for having me.
Discover how to heal your brain after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com. Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.